there's a specific feeling I don't think that you ever forget. You're working, just going about your day as you normally would. You get a notification, so you look down at your phone, and it's your child's school. It's not a reminder about a bake sale. It's a notification that there's a gunman in the area and the school's going into lockdown. I remember sitting there alone in my home office. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I didn't even immediately call anybody. I mean, I knew my spouse would definitely just freak out and panic. So I just kind of sat there. I don't know for how long, but I sat there and I thought, how many times have I done this? Is this the time that my child's school is going to be on the news? This happened twice. Same school, same child, in a theoretic good and in a good school system. That was the moment that I just stopped pretending that we were taking an adventure. And it was the moment that I fully understood we could no longer stay in the United States. It was the moment that I realized that for my child's well-being and future, we have to move to the UK. 3 years ago, we left. Packed up everything that we had, packed up what we could into 2 suitcases each, sold or gave away everything else that we had. We housed our dog, sold our home, and jumped on a plane. But I wasn't fully prepared in all of the things that I was thinking about, what would change, what we'd have to adapt to, the new lifestyle that we would have. I never really contemplated the full effects of what the chronological of it, what was actually going to happen next to my body, to my nervous system, to my relationship with my spouse, to my child and my relationship with her, and every single assumption that I had about what a normal life is supposed to feel like. And I guess all of that is what this video is all about. To wipe my nose, because I always do. So 3 years. I do want to be honest with everybody. I'm usually honest. I try my hardest to be honest. But I want to make sure you understand where my head was when we actually made this decision. Because I think some of you might recognize this feeling. When we left America, I was certain of one thing. I personally am not going to change as much as I think I am. I wasn't going to change. Like, my personality, who I was going to stay the same. Yes, I would learn some new things and I would grow as far as, learning cultures and stuff. I would adapt where necessary. I'd learn to drive on the left. I'd figure out the NHS. I'd be able to navigate council tax and who I need to call when I need something done. But me, my identity, my worldview, my core, how I thought about the universe around me, that was staying put. That wasn't going to really shift that much. I was taking my whole self to Britain and parking it somewhere, just, with better access to public transport, basically. But I was wrong about almost everything. Here's what I find most interesting. The changes didn't come from where I expected them to. I thought culture shock would be the thing that shifted me. The customs, the humor, the weather, the social norms that I didn't even know existed until I broke them and someone made fun of me about them. Don't get me wrong, all of that absolutely happens and continues to happen even 3 years in. But the changes that I went through all the way down, they kind of came from something quieter. They came from what Britain didn't ask of me. I kind of wanted to walk through that a little bit because a lot of these videos tend to be a little bit of like a highlight reel, my perspective on a certain aspect. And I didn't want to go through a list of stuff. I didn't want to give a data report because I feel like what happens when you move a human being from one system to another system, that is much more powerful and much more influential, I think, on all of the decisions that you make when you live in a new place, particularly when you live in a new country. And I've come to realize that my body knew first. It's kind of interesting and revealing, I think, that what your nervous system does, at least from my situation in America, moving here to southeast of England, when it finally stops running a certain program of high alert that it's been running for decades, basically your entire life, and then you start to come out of that, and what you slowly and uncomfortably acclimatize, however you want to say it. And then comes with it is this like strange grief about what you realize what you were calling normal and what you realized you could have had sooner in your life. Okay, let's start with the most undignified version of this story. In America, I carried antacids in my bag the way most people carry lip balm, probably. It's just always there. For me, for my partner, it was automatic. I would get tension. And it wasn't just the antacids, it was the paracetamol, what we call it, ibuprofen. I'd get tension in my neck all the time. All of the sudden, I would get an itchy skin when I started to eat bread too much, or I'd feel like I'd need a nap after having pasta. And I had completely stopped noticing because I had been doing it my whole life and I didn't realize there was anything different out there. I filed it like in my brain under this is just what being in an adult body feels like. This is what getting older is all about, right? And I was constantly exhausted. I would constantly have these like ebb and flows of bursts of energy and then a complete like down from it. Within a few weeks of living here in the UK, something completely changed. I was having trouble finding things to eat that I liked because I had gotten so used to all of that like corn syrupy, additive, sodium filled food that a lot of the stuff here, even if it was the same brand, etc., wasn't satisfying me. So I was sticking to a lot more fruits, vegetables, homemade foods instead of processed foods. And something kind of changed. My digestion settled a bit, my bloating eased up, my skin stopped behaving like I was in some kind of permanent argument with something. The dull, low-grade tension that I had constantly walked around in faded, and I felt lighter. I looked lighter. I lost weight without punishing myself for it, or working myself out to the bone. My joints felt better. My stamina improved. My breathing was better. I slept like a normal human being again. And I genuinely felt like it was kind of going through withdrawal. So I remember when it hit me, I was walking through town and I was sort of craving something for lunch. It was lunchtime. I was hungry and I was kind of craving like gross, dirty, like grease-filled pizza that I would get. It's a normal thing in New Jersey. For those of you who've never been to New York, New Jersey area, heavy Italian influence in that area. So pizza is like, American pizza is just banging in that area. And it's definitely something I was addicted to. And I remember thinking, okay, I'll just like pop into Iceland or whatever and pick up a frozen pizza for myself. And I went into the store, I'm looking at the frozen pizzas, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I really want this. I know it's not going to taste exactly the same as obviously as getting like a homemade mom and pop pizza from home. And I'm sort of craving it, but I know this isn't going to actually settle my cravings. And mainly it's because I'm craving all of those extra additives, right, that are banned or at least heavily restricted here in the UK. And that my craving is really just those additives. So eating this isn't going to really do anything for me, and except maybe satisfy some hunger, but I could do that with something else or go home and make something that's better for me. And I had just been standing there looking at the pizza and thinking in my brain, I would rather go home and make myself something from scratch than grab this pizza or go and get something, in town that was ready made. And that was never something that I was thinking of in the US, unless it was because I couldn't afford it. That would be the only reason that I would think it would be better for me to go home and do this. And I was walking home from town thinking, oh my God, I'm literally going through withdrawal of this. My body is so used to all of these chemicals and all of this crap that America puts in their food that I don't know what it's like to eat regular food. My body doesn't understand what it's like to eat regular food. Mentally, I'm in a spot where I'd much rather give myself actual food than crap, even the better, cleaner ingredients version of the crap. And it just made me think about the standards that Britain has versus the standards that America has. What Britain did for me, what living here in the UK did for me, was take away my responsibility to research the ingredients, to figure out if this is something that I want to put in my body, to pay a premium for the standards. Because in America, it would be much more expensive to get something that is organic or natural in some way that doesn't have all those additives. The baseline was just higher here in the UK. And my body had noticed it already, and it was going through that withdrawal. And that was the moment that my brain finally caught up with it. And I want to sit with that for just a sec, because I think realizing that was kind of a setup for everything else that came for the next 3 years. About 6 months or so, maybe 8 months or so into moving here to the UK, we were traveling. We were doing a UK road trip. And I remember I was sitting in the bedroom by myself. I was just kind of decompressing, breathing, maybe doing something on my phone. And I heard this loud, huge bang, and my body froze. My chest got tight, and I immediately ran to the window, expecting to see some kind of like gun violence or something. Nobody else in the house reacted. My child was asleep, didn't even hear it. Partner didn't come in, ask if everything was okay. Then I realized, as my pulse is going 1,000 miles an hour, 1,000 miles a minute, whatever the saying is, I realized more bangs were going off. And I was like, oh my God, it's just fireworks. It's just fireworks in the middle of town. We're okay. It's nothing that I have to worry about. But I sat there for a good 30 seconds or so with my pulse just going and my blood pressure rising, realizing that this loud bang in this strange town or this strange city that I was in wasn't something I needed to be scared of. It was just fireworks. Now, when you've spent your entire life in a country where that question, is that a gun, is the first place your mind goes to when you hear something like that, it's like your whole life you're figuring out a body count. I don't know. My nervous system had been answering that question automatically. Presume it's a gun. Presume it's a gun. Get ready to run. Get ready to escape. And it was without any constitution. It was instinct. It was without me even thinking about it for years. So I didn't even stop noticing. I didn't even notice it. Now I know some people, especially British people or people who have never encountered any kind of gun violence, will probably push back. And you'll say that was a complete overreaction. Fireworks sound completely different from guns, etc. And because you've never had that kind of reaction, you don't understand where I'm coming from. And maybe you haven't consciously, and I completely get that, and I'm definitely not discounting it. But I want to offer you this. The absence of fear is not exactly the same thing as safety. Sometimes it's just being familiar with a certain threat level that is constantly underlying your daily life so thoroughly and so normalized in your culture that it doesn't even read as a threat to you. It just reads as something you have to deal with, something that you encounter or you have to be prepared for all the time. That's a very different kind of tenseness that stays with you. I mean, I still, 3 years in, find myself entering a building and immediately trying to figure out where the exits are, noticing people when they have long coats on. When I sit in a restaurant, it's really, really hard for me to sit with my back to the window or to the door so that I can't, because I get really nervous if I can't see what's happening or who's coming in and out. It's just something that living in America has conditioned me to live life in, like that constant state of panic. Of course, it's a lot better here now that I've been able to calm down and I realize that guns are not as prevalent and I don't have to worry about it as much. But I have to admit, I still do it. And I do it so automatically and so quickly that it barely registers unless I'm conscious of it. Like unless I have my back to the door and I'm like, I have to change seats. It makes me really uncomfortable. It's just a natural thing of how I grew up and how I navigated through public spaces, especially as an adult, and especially when I had my child. My body had been running that program my entire adult life. And as things got more and more volatile and more angry and just polarized in America and violence became much more prevalent, that program just started to expand and become more and more automatic as the years went on. And I was calling it normal. When I got here to the UK, the environment stopped reinforcing all of that old script because I didn't have to think about it anymore. I didn't have to worry about the gun violence. I didn't have to worry about the constant threat of violence popping up. It's not to say that there isn't violence and there isn't crime here in the UK, but it's just that it's not as commonplace, and it's not as, the scenarios of possibility are significantly reduced. And over the 3 years of living here, slowly, very slowly, as I said, I'm still gradually getting better about it. The scan just started to quiet a bit. Sometimes I realize that I'm tense for no reason. And I take a deep breath and remind myself that I'm in the UK, I'm not in the US, and my shoulders start to drop. The tension starts to go away. My jaw starts to unclench. I know I am safe. I don't have to worry about what that person over there in the corner is doing. I don't have to calculate the crowd, and I don't have to focus on how to exit anything. I can just walk home. I can just sit and enjoy my meal or the movie or whatever's happening. And those are the key moments, I feel like, especially in the last year or so, where I understand what safety means for the first time. It's not being vigilant. It's the absence of the threat. It's the absence of imminent danger, or an expectation of it, at least. You don't have to worry about having that be the default setting in your life. But I do have to admit that there was some grief that came with that realization. For all of the years that I had spent carrying that tension without ever really realizing I had a choice, it didn't have to be that way. So about a year into living here, I had this horrible stomach pain. My partner and I were by ourselves, and we had gotten some food and we were watching a movie together, and all of a sudden I had these horrible pains in my stomach, and I could not eat anything, I couldn't drink anything. It was like stabbing pains in my stomach. And without really missing a beat, I suffered through it for 3 or 4 days because my American brain turned on. I was flipping to the old scripts of medical situation. Panic, right? That is probably something serious, but I don't think that I can afford to go to the doctor. I don't know what treatment it's going to be. I don't know, am I going to be able to afford it? How much is the scan? Is there a referral process? What happens if my insurance doesn't cover it? What if it's really serious? How is this financially going to affect us? And there is all this pre-packaged financial angst that came with it, that for 3 or 4 days, all I did was just live in pain. I didn't eat, I didn't sleep, I didn't drink anything. I was just sitting there with these stabbing pains in my stomach for like 3-4 days straight. So finally, I got off my ass and I said, I can't live like this, or I have to be able to eat, I have to be able to drink. I finally called my GP. I got an appointment and I was referred again for blood work, and I got some blood work. And when they got the blood work back, they said that I had a stomach infection. But whatever the indication was that there's an infection was like sky high, but there was nothing else wrong. It was just a stomach infection, probably from something that I ate. And the pain, because I hadn't gone to the doctor right away, my body was actually like getting rid of it itself. It was just taking a really long time. So I ended up not needing any antibiotics or anything like that. And really, it started to become where I could drink water and I could eat toast and stuff like that. And it was able to like work itself out. But I remember having that anxiety before I went to the doctor. And even for months after I heard from the doctor, I'd seen the doctor and I got my blood work back, and I even was starting to feel better, that I was waiting for a bill. And I couldn't believe that I didn't have to pay anything at the doctor's appointment, that I didn't get anything in the mail saying that you owe this much, that I don't know, I was just expecting these fragmented bills with the costs arriving over like the next 6 months, which I was used to in America. You should have seen the kinds of stuff that we had every time we went to the doctor. I paid a health surcharge to the NHS when I moved here. I had to, in order to even support apply for my visa, and I continue to do a contribution through my wages, and every time I have to renew my visa. And turns out when I needed the system, it was there for me and I didn't have to pay anything out of pocket. I remember like really sitting with that and being amazed and telling just about everybody that I talked to that day that I discovered this. Like it was this brand new thing that happened. And my British partner and all of my British family were like, yeah, that's how it is here. And I still to this day feel, I don't know, I guess I just feel kind of lucky. Like I've hit the jackpot in a way that I'm able to take advantage of this amazing system that I help support, but it's a system that works for everybody. And it was a small thing, it was a small health scare, and it turned out to be nothing. And I'm, of course, very glad that it was nothing. But I have known people in America that have delayed going to the doctor because they were afraid of the cost, not the diagnosis, the cost. My father had throat cancer. He had a cyst on his neck. That's how we, knew something was wrong. And he waited like 3 or 4 months, I think, 4, maybe 5 months before he actually went to the hospital because he was so worried that it was going to cost a lot of money, that it was going to be something so serious that he wasn't going to be able to afford it. And he was going to lose his house, he was going to lose his retirement, everything he had worked for his entire life, because it was going to be something serious and he wouldn't be able to participate. He wouldn't be able to participate in the treatment. He wouldn't be able to get the treatment that he needed. And that's not a healthcare system. That's not the way that you should be treating your health. It's extortion with a stethoscope. And Americans have accepted it as if it's normal and as if it's a feature that you should be content with. The greatest gift that the NHS ever gave me was never any kind of treatment or anything. It was always just a removal of what I consider like anticipatory terror, that I don't have to have any of that background dread of being sick. Life does not have to feel like one long administrative emergency. And I genuinely did not know that until I came here. I'm going to stop here for just a second. What I'm about to get into, the chapter about my daughter and the one about the relationship, those are ones that I almost cut from this video. I recorded them and I sat on them for a little bit because they felt really, really personal for a public video. But then as I was doing my final edits, I realized that they're the whole point. So they're staying in. If you're a member of the Mandyverse Collective, you've heard some of the longer unedited versions of these and the more personal stories. If you're not, that's what we do. Just FYI, in the members section, the Mandyverse Collective, the conversations that don't often fit into a public video. So if you don't want to wait 3 years to find out some of the personal behind the scenes stuff, the link is in the description. Hit that join button below if that sounds like your kind of gig. We'd love to have you. All right, the chapters I almost left out. We moved here to the UK with a child. And anyone who has made a significant decision while responsible for somebody else, a child, a parent, partner, you understand the specific weight that comes along with that. Every moment of difficulty, every doubt, every instinct or counter instinct is filtered through a second question that runs underneath everything else. Was this the right decision for them? And my child was old enough to know what they were leaving behind, but young enough to adapt to where she was arriving at. But it didn't make it any easier for her though, which in turn made it very hard for us. That was a very specific kind of hard for us and her. She had this great social network in her old life. She had a school that she knew she was doing very well at. She was in a lot of clubs. She was really familiar with the neighborhood. She felt comfortable. She had a life that looked from the outside like it was absolutely working. And we decided to completely dismantle it on her. We sold or donated everything that didn't fit into 2 suitcases each. And we made her do the same. We got on a plane and we started over completely. It sounds insane on paper, actually. I know that. And most people reminded us of that as well when we were leaving. But when you factor in that the school had been shut down twice due to active threats in the area, when you factor in all of it, everything that was happening politically, everything that was happening violence-wise, It was the most rational decision we have ever made. 3 years later, she takes school trips abroad, standard school trips, not luxury extras, places I never visited until adulthood. She's thinking about university and her GCSEs with genuine curiosity rather than dread and pressure. She has a circle of friends that feels real and chosen and hers. She's volunteering. She wants to take summer classes to get ahead. She's open-minded. She's empathetic. She's strong-willed in a way that means she knows herself. She's not bashful. She is not afraid. Not in a way that means she's difficult, but she's genuinely a remarkable young woman. And I couldn't be prouder of her. There was a day she'd come home from school, dropped her bag, made herself a cup of tea, because obviously she's British now, actual tea, black, mill, properly British, and sat down, and we just started talking about her day. And I was sitting across from her, and as she was telling me everything that happened, the drama plus the tests and all the stuff the teacher said that she didn't like, I thought, my God, she totally belongs here. She's totally acclimatized to living in the UK. She belongs here in a way that I'm still working towards and may never achieve, and she's already arrived. That was the moment that I just stopped second guessing the decision entirely. I mean, I miss my life in the US, miss things about my life in the US, but seeing my child surpassing every hope I had ever had for this move already. And I say that as someone who didn't come in with low expectations, because I normally don't have low expectations. I normally put too much pressure on myself when it comes to that. But I just didn't have a frame of reference for what this level of okay actually looked like. And now I do, and I'm beaming. So the relationship almost didn't survive the move. I want to be honest about that. Not dramatically, but because the honesty is useful. When you move abroad, the power dynamic shifts completely. Because in the US, I carried the administrative weight of our life. Because I knew how everything worked. And I had the instincts, right? It was all instinct for me. And I could think about it and figure out the next steps without really missing a beat. Whereas it took my partner so long to figure it out and understand it because it was completely alien to him. When we landed here in the UK, all of that flipped overnight. And suddenly I was the one who didn't know how to do anything, didn't know how anything worked. And I had placed expectations on my partner that assumed the reverse would simply just happen, that he'd just pick up where I left off. And that wasn't really fair of me. But I was so overwhelmed and overcome with what I had to deal with and making sure my child had everything that they needed that I wasn't really thinking in terms of fairness. I was just thinking about the next obstacle we had to overcome. He hadn't been in the UK for almost 2 decades. He was Americanized to a certain extent, and I was setting him up to fail and then being completely hurt when he did, because I just expected him to know everything that was happening in the UK, not taking into account that almost 20 years, everything changes in 20 years, everywhere. The same reason, things in the US changed in 20 years, which caused us to leave, which we had never thought we would ever get to. Why wouldn't there be changes in the UK since he had been here? It was a big hurdle for us, and it took a lot of time. It required really hard, really loud, sometimes honest conversations. Neither of us particularly wanted to have them, but we had to. We didn't have a choice. If we wanted to stay together, if we wanted to be there for our child, if we wanted to make this work. So what the process gave us, though, on the other side was each other. Again, in a different way, but in a stronger, more solid way. We were both helping each other from scratch, basically. 2 people who had lived together for nearly 2 decades, rebuilding how they operated as a unit in a place that gave neither of us a shortcut or a leg up as far as being familiar with the processes anyway. When you go through that, you really learn things about somebody when you're under that kind of pressure, you really see the core of who people are. You didn't realize that the comfort that you were in actively prevented you from seeing that core. We are so much better for it. I'm so grateful we were able to come through it and we didn't give up. Of course, it wasn't immediate, and there are still things that we're still working through, and there are costs involved. but it's genuinely better. And I think that is the biggest thing about exile. And I use that word kind of deliberately because that's what this has sometimes felt like. Exile is an education that you can't really replicate in any other fashion other than living somewhere completely different with nobody to fall back on. The distance from everything that you were told you were, everything you were told was normal, everything that you assumed was simply just how life worked, you have to relearn everything. It gives you a clarity, though, in staying in a place that actively denies you. It gives you a much clearer picture of where you came from and what your life was actually like. You don't often see the sharks that you're swimming with until you get out of the water. From here in the UK, I can see America very differently than I could from inside it. And when you're in the thick of something, you see how it affects your immediate situation. But from a distance, you can see the long view. You can see the macro, the structural, the patterns, the systemic flaws. And what I see watching from here now is not a country in temporary crisis. It is a country whose foundational system has been gradually and quietly dismantled and eroding, and replaced with the expectation that individuals will privately absorb the cost of that dismantling and just write it off as the American character. But it's not character, it's compliance. And I couldn't see the full shape of it until I left. And credit to my partner, because he saw it. He saw it the minute that we were there. He saw it the minute that we got together. He called it the American bubble, and I pushed back on it really hard for a really long time. But he was right. You never see all of the stuff that feels normal until you're outside of the cult. Everything feels so normal when you're inside the cult. So 3 years. Yeah. Body change, nervous system changed. Healthcare worked when I needed it. Didn't break the bank. My daughter is becoming someone I barely recognize, but I'm extremely proud of and look forward to seeing how she makes her mark on the world. And my relationship with my partner is the strongest it's ever been. Most importantly, though, I think, is my understanding of what ordinary life can actually feel like change. And I finally have the opportunity to map it my way, on my terms. I also want to say this because I think it belongs in any kind of honest analysis. Britain is not perfect, and I don't feel as though it's some utopia and it's some kind of perfect world. The Americanization that I've watched creep into this culture, the fast food chains, the consumer materialism, the corporatism crossing the pond, it concerns me very much. I left one version of it, and I don't want to watch a second version of it build here. And the political situation with what I can only describe as someone who watched MAGA form in real time, as MAGA 2.0 taking shape here, that obviously bears watching very closely. I'm not offering a paradise. I'm offering a very personal comparison. And here's what I want to say to anyone who has watched this far and has been quietly asking themselves hard questions about where they live and what they've accepted and about what they've stopped noticing. I want you to know you're not crazy. I know it feels that way sometimes, but you're not. The instinct that something is structurally wrong, not just politically or culturally, but in the architecture of the daily life, that instinct is data. The discomfort is a signal. And 3 years of living inside a genuinely different design have confirmed for me more thoroughly than any argument ever could that signal was accurate. It can be better, but I'm not here to tell you to move. Your life, your constraints, your reasons, they're all yours. But I am telling you, as someone who has now lived on both sides, some of what you've been calling adulthood is not actually adulthood. Some of what you've been calling normal is not normal. It's just comfortable and familiar. And there is a very important, vast difference between those things. What the UK gave me, this community, this system that I live in now, this lifestyle and pace that I'm able to create and curate for us, is a safety net, a blanket, and room to breathe. I hope in return, I can give something back to it, to this wonderful place that has embraced me. And to everyone watching this right now, feeling a little less alone in whatever they're carrying. This is why this channel exists, not to endorse or condemn any certain way of life, but to compare my experience of living in the UK with my experience of how I lived in the United States. Again, a very unique personal experience. In hopes that it helps somebody either appreciate what they have or realize where they are or dig their heels in even with their own core opinions. This video named something. I'd like to have a conversation properly, and the Maniverse is where we have that. So again, the link's in the description to join us. Click that join button if you want. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you so much for taking a chance on us. This is what we do. We have honest conversations. We think slowly. We think as carefully and honestly as we can about matters, and we are respectful in as many discussions as we can have. So thank you all so much for listening, and here's to another 3 years. I'll see you next time.